this video, we're going to talk about Maegor Targaryen I, the third Targaryen king to rule Westeros and more commonly known as Maegor the Cruel. He came to the throne after the untimely death of his brother Aenys Targaryen I. If you want to hear more about Aenys Targaryen, the second Targaryen king in Westeros, you can listen to my other video linked below and then come back to this video. If you don't want to watch the Aenys video, basically Aenys mysteriously died 5 years into his rule shortly after exiling his brother Maegor. It is rumored that his mother and the first queen of Westeros, Visenya, had a hand in her nephew Aenys' death. When Aenys died, Visenya flew on her dragon to Pentos to get Maegor, her son. Maegor went to Dragonstone, the ancient seat of the Targaryens, only long enough to be crowned king. This angered some people, since the second Targaryen king, Aenys' son Aegon, was rightfully the next in line for the throne. As well, those of the faith did not like Maegor. He was originally exiled for taking multiple wives, something greatly frowned upon in Westeros. And in fact, the act of marrying him got a septon chopped into tiny pieces and paraded around the city. In Maegor's rule, he would end up marrying 6 times, and of his 6 wives, only 2 would survive him, but we'll talk about them later. So basically, Aenys dies. Visenya, who was the mother of Aenys and Maegor, ends up flying to get the exiled Maegor. Maegor comes back and says, "Nope, my nephew Aegon, who's the rightful next king, is not going to have this throne. It's mine." He ends up taking it. People are getting super upset. Grand Maester Gawain protests his coronation and says, "Nope, your nephew should be king. You were exiled. You were exiled for a reason. We don't want you here." And Maegor responded by calling him a traitor and beheaded him with his sword Blackfire, which was a sword passed down and will be passed down through the Targaryens. Few people went against Maegor's claim for kingship after that, and few supported Aegon's claim because they didn't want to die. Unfortunately, or fortunately rather, there are people that did oppose his rule, and it was bitter the entire reign that he had, which was only 6 years. The Faith Militant, the Poor Fellows, and the Order of the Warrior Sun opposed him. King's Landing was seized by them, and they held the Red Keep, which was being created in King's Landing, and the Sept of Remembrance. Maegor, not even caring, not even, bothering with them, flew on his dragon right into King's Landing, went to Visenya Hill. He raised the Targaryen banners, and he drew thousands of people to him. Visenya, next, the original queen and the mother of Maegor, challenged the people that opposed him, said, if you don't believe he should rule, then, you need to challenge him, you need to do combat, and Sir Daemon decided to do a trial of 7 with 6 of his warrior sons. So Sir Daemon and 6 warrior sons versus Maegor and his 6 chosen men. The battle was said to be long and brutal, but Maegor ended up being the last man standing. Unfortunately, he took a really hard blow to the head. For 27 days, nobody saw Maegor. He was in a coma, nobody could get him to wake up, and finally, Queen Alice came back from Pentos to King's Landing and brought Tiana with her, which was rumored to be Maegor's lover, and some said that it was the Queen's lover too, so she ended up taking over the care for Maegor, which is something that kind of upsetted the people that supported Maegor, because you have this woman from Pentos coming over and, working this mojo on you. They didn't agree with it. He was already a very unorthodox king to begin with. But on the 30th day, her mojo did work because he woke up and he went out and the people cheered for him. However, the people that were not cheering was the Sept of Remembrance and the Hill of Rhaenys, where the warrior sons were in prayer, and Maegor, not even caring, he mounted his dragon and he descended upon the Sept of Remembrance and just brought it on fire. People were on fire, they were screaming, they were fleeing, and the people that did flee were then killed by archers, and they were speared that Maegor had brought to chop them down. Despite this, despite him winning the trial of 7, and despite him descending on the Sept of Remembrance and letting them know, we're not going to tolerate this crap, you're accepting my rule, get over it, the High Septon still opposed him and, said, I do not want you ruling. Maegor, unfortunately, he did not care. He did not care if they didn't agree with him. He didn't care that the High Septon didn't like him. And this actually caused a few battles that were pretty bloody and terrible. There was a Battle of Stonebridge, and there were poor fellows, and they basically were slaughtered. And they were slaughtered so bad that the bridge and the castle were named Bitterbridge after that battle. A bigger battle happened, the Great Fork of the Blackwater, where 13,000 poor fellows, as well as hundreds of other knights from the warrior sons and hundreds of other rebel lords of the Riverlands and Westerlands joined them, ended up just being obliterated by King Maegor and his followers. And, it's kind of hard to beat out dragons, because despite how many men you get, it's hard to kill a dragon that is descending on you and letting flames go and just wrecking. So despite the battles, despite him winning, despite the Trial of Seven, this would be an ongoing problem with the rest of his reign. He would never be accepted by the people of the faith and considered to be an abomination. And even at one point when the High Septon was replaced after mysteriously dying with a High Septon that was more liked Maegor a little bit more, he was planted in there, the faith still was like, nope, we don't like you, we want you out of here. So after all these battles, eventually in 43 AC, so after Aegon's landing or Aegon's conquest, Aegon, the grandson of Aegon and the son of Aenys, who was supposed to be the rightful new king, decided to try to take his throne back. Unfortunately, at the battle beneath the God's Eye, Aegon did end up dying, and he left his wife and his sister Rhaenys behind, along with his two twin daughters, and his dragon Quicksilver also died, which was his dad's originally. Shortly after this blow of Aegon being killed, and keep in mind, through, family relations, Aegon is Maegor's nephew, so he basically had, after taking his crown away, and, if you think about it too, his great aunt also, the one that denied her nephew the throne as well, ends up killing him. Finally, in 44 AC, so a year after Aegon ends up dying, Queen Visenya ends up passing away, and in the confusion that was happening, Aenys' widow, so Queen Alyssa, ends up slipping away from Dragonstone with her children, as well as the sword Dark Sister, which was Visenya's Valyrian sword. Unfortunately, when she fled, she couldn't take her second oldest son that was alive, Viserys. He's currently the King's Squire kept in the Red Keep, and he was brutally tortured and questioned for his mom disappearing. And Tyenna of the Tower, so Maegor's mistress that came from Pentos, ended up torturing him, killing him, and then the king decided to leave his 15-year-old nephew in the castle's courtyard for a fortnight to just rot, hopefully forcing his mother, the Queen Alyssa, to come back and claim his body. So yeah, I think about this. Maegor has now killed 2 of his nephews and just has no regard for his brother's children. Finally, people dealt with him for another 4 years, and they were like, you want to know what? We can't take this crazy bastard anymore. We can't deal with this. And they ended up supporting the 3rd son of Queen Alyssa and the late King Aenys, Prince Jaehaerys, and people ended up rousing around him, they brought fleets together, the poor fellows, the river run stood with them. Jaehaerys at this time is only 14 years old. And he is basically accepting that he should be king and he needs to take out his uncle. When this claim was made, people were pretty much, I'm out. 2 of the Kingsguard of Maegor ended up leaving him. One of his own wives, Rhaenys, so his niece and his nephew's wife and sister. After Aegon ended up dying, he took his widowed wife, who was his niece, and married her. And when Jaehaerys, which would be her younger brother, was like, I'm taking this back, this realm is mine, she slipped out in the middle of the night to get away from Maegor, and she took Dreamfire and she took Blackfyre away from her husband and king as he slept. Maegor woke up, he was super confused. Some feel like he was just betrayed and he didn't know what to do. He didn't have Visenya with him anymore, who was his greatest advisor and usually told him, you know, this is what you need to do. He tried to get lords to come together to, you know, be like, come on, what are we going to do? We got to put these lords down. We have the river run over here. We have the poor fellows against us. We have the Lord of Storm's End coming at us, who's now been declared the hand and protector of the realm by Prince Jaehaerys, who wants to take it back. And unfortunately, the only lords that were come were just small lords from around the area. They didn't have any power to stop these people. And the king basically knew he was screwed. So he sent everyone away, and he remained in the throne room, and the next morning they found him with barbs cutting his wrists, and then a barb through his throat, and people to this day don't know if he was assassinated, if he committed suicide, or some people think that the Iron Throne itself rose up and killed him. So that ended the reign of Maegor the Cruel. He ruled for 6 years, and his rule would be followed by Prince Jaehaerys, so Aenys' son in the line that should have ruled, and his rule would actually really help mend the 7 kingdoms back together and heal some of the damage that Maegor had created. So even though Maegor was a pretty shitty ruler and he was pretty cruel, he actually does have one distinction. He completed the Red Keep. So the Red Keep that you see in the show Game of Thrones, he completed that. His father Aegon had started it, his brother Aenys had worked on it, and he was the person to actually finish it. And he had a bunch of secret passages created in it, secret tunnels. So the tunnels you even see in the Game of Thrones people using, he created those. All those winding, twisting passages, and he wanted to use it so that he had places to go and, you know, places to hide in. And after it was done being constructed, he threw a big party for all the people that helped create it. So all the crafters, the artisans, everybody, the masons, anyone who had worked on the tunnels and the secret passages. He threw a 3-day huge party just for them down in the tunnels. And at the end of the 3 days, he ends up putting them all at the sword and just massacring them, because he didn't want them to tell any of the secrets of the Red Keep. He wanted all his little secret passageways and everything to be kept to himself. So even though he accomplished this great thing of finishing the Red Keep, it was marred by the fact that he just slaughtered anyone who worked on it. So later this would become a problem, because the Scepter Remembrance, when you remember, earlier we talked about how he took his dragons and, you know, he went after all the people, the faith in there, and burned them and then killed them with archers and spears. He wanted the ruins of the Scepter Remembrance taken away, and he wanted to create a huge dragon pit. So a huge area, a stable for the dragons, where all of them could be, and it would be like just this great place. And he couldn't find anyone who wanted to build it, because everyone knew what happened with the last people. You know, why are we going to build anything with you, and afterwards we're just going to be put to the sword? So eventually, he had to have prisoners help build these stables, because nobody wanted to mess with this guy. No one wanted to help him. They were like, no, I'm going to die after I do this. And then he had to get people from across the Narrow Sea to come and advise these people. So the last thing I want to talk about Maegor the Cruel is his 6 wives. So Maegor kept remarrying because he couldn't get any heirs, and he actually is the last of the line of Visenya. So when Aegon the First, who was the conqueror, he had his 2 sister wives, Visenya and Rhaenys, and Visenya only had Maegor, and when Maegor died, that was the end of her line. So all the Targaryens that come down, they come from Rhaenys and Aegon. So the first bride of Maegor was Cerys of House Hightower. They married in 25 AC, and by 45 AC she died of mysterious illness. Most people believe that Maegor had a hand in this because he said, you know, I consummated this marriage 12 times on our wedding night, you know, I'm constantly consummating our marriage, you know, doing my duties, and she's not getting pregnant. So she eventually, after 20 years of marriage, falls ill, ends up passing away, and people think that Maegor had a hand in it. The second wife was Alice of House Harroway, and this marriage was actually secretly done in 39 AC, so about 14 years after his first marriage, and this is actually what got him exiled from Westeros, because he knew that you can't take a second wife while still being married. and he did it anyway. He didn't care. The septon that ended up officiating it got cut into little pieces. It was a big deal. Aenys ended up exiling his brother because he went against his wishes. He, did this behind his back, and he couldn't have the hand of the king and his brother doing that, and he took away his title of Prince of Dragonstone. She actually was the first woman to become pregnant by Maegor in 48 AC, but like every single baby that ends up coming from any woman that he impregnates, the baby was monstrous, it was twisted, it was eyeless. In a fury, Maegor ends up killing his wives, his septas, the Grand Maester, just goes crazy. And at the same time, Tyanna, who was his mistress from Pentos, goes, "You want to know what? This monster's baby had nothing to do with you, Maegor. It had everything to do with your cheating wife. The reason why the baby's like this is because the gods knew that she cheated on you, and they gave her a monstrous baby." And Maegor, without any proof, believed this, ends up getting the queen killed, her companions, her father, who was also the Hand. Every Haraway or Haraway kinsman King Maegor could find from King's Landing to Harrenhal were massacred. So basically, if this guy would have been on the throne for more than 6 years, who knows what other house would have been exterminated. His third wife would be Tyanna of the Tower, so she's the lady that came from Pentos, and people were terrified of her. She rose up from a tavern dancer to a courtesan. She practiced sorcery, alchemy, and she married the king in 42 AC. She was really good at getting out secrets. She was the one that ended up, killing Viserys, torturing him, and eventually she would confess that she was the reason why the king had monstrous children, and that she was poisoning his brides, and that's the reason why all his babies were all screwed up when they were born. And he was PO'd. He ended up taking his sword, Blackfire, he cut out her heart in 48 AC and fed the heart to his dogs. The last 3 brides that he would take would be all at once. They were called the Black Brides. It happened in 47 AC. He took these women that had proven fertility because he was sick of not having any heirs, and he ended up taking them all. And these were women that were widowed due to him. So his wars and his fight, or people that he put to death, these are the wives of these people. So they were Eleanor. She was 19. She was proven fertile and ended up getting pregnant by the king. And again, he had a stillborn monster. It was eyeless. It had small wings. She ended up surviving the labor. Rhaena of House Targaryen. So originally she was her brother's wife, Aegon. When Aegon, the nephew of Maegor, was killed, Maegor ended up taking her as his wife. Maegor actually declared one of her twin daughters as his heir, and disinherited Queen Alyssa's surviving son, Jaehaerys. She also survived the king. And then the last person in the 3 that married him was Jaina of House Westerling. In 47 AC, she was pregnant, she had the child early, she had a stillborn monster, and she just did not survive long, the child. So the 3rd Targaryen king, Maegor the Cruel, was a psycho. If he thought you cheated on him, your entire family, your cousins, your relatives, I don't care, whatever, would be exterminated. He massacred people to keep secret. His reign was a bloody one, and of his 6 wives, only 2 survived. He was just a very awful person, and unrightfully took the throne. When he ended up passing away 6 years into his reign, everyone let out a collective breath because finally the psycho was gone and they didn't have to worry about dying for no reason. And the next king that would take over is Jaehaerys I, and he is an amazing king, and we will talk about him next week. So make sure you like, subscribe, come back for more geeky videos every day. We do one Game of Thrones or a Song of Ice and Fire video once a week, so make sure you come back for more every day.